Hi, welcome to Camp Happy Mail. I'm Maureen and I'm glad you're here today. So lately on Instagram, I've been seeing people posting cards made with a technique called the Reverse Emboss Blackout Technique. I thought it looked pretty easy, so I thought I'd give it a try. It basically uses some 3D embossing folders, and here I have 3 of those from AlteNew. You can pretty much use any embossing folders you have. I'm finding that florals work really well. I haven't tried other ones yet, but we'll get there. I'm going to use some blending brushes and some Catherine Polar inks. You can use any blending tools that you have, and you can use pretty much any inks that you have. So use what you have. So I had to move the ink pads because I had to make a little bit more room on my desk so that I could put the Big Shot out here. Now we have to emboss some card panels so that we can do this technique. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Every die cut machine is just a little bit different. Even if you do have a Big Shot, yours may not be calibrated the same way that mine is. And I haven't figured out exactly what sandwich I need for these 3D embossing folders. It seems that they're different for every company. And I really need to start making a list for the ones that I have, because it always takes me a little bit to figure out which plates I need to use and which order they need to go in, and it's a whole process. So you might need to play around with your machine a little bit, just like you're going to see me do here. So basically, I'm using, I believe it's Neenah 80-pound cardstock. You can use anything that has a little bit of weight to it. The thicker the weight, the better the impression you're going to get. And I believe that this was 80-pound cardstock. So I first tried this with the multi-platform that comes with the Big Shot. And just on the base level, it was too thick. That gray pad up there is from Stampin' Up. I think you can get them other places. It's an adapter plate, and it's made for embossing folders. So I'm just trying various things here to figure out the thickness that I need this to go through, so that I have enough pressure to get the indentation from the embossing folder. So you're going to see me try a combination of things. In this instance, it was too thick. And that is actually watercolor paper that I'm putting on top of there, because watercolor paper tends to be a little bit thicker than the Neenah cardstock. So that seemed to work okay. So I believe that was just the base platform with the embossing folder that had the piece of 80-pound cardstock in it, and then the gray adapter plate, and then 2 pieces of watercolor paper. I'm not sure the thickness of the watercolor paper. So I ran that through once, and then I checked it and found that the middle of the embossing folder hadn't quite given me that great of an impression. So I thought maybe I would get more pressure if I actually put the watercolor pieces on top of the embossing folder. And the last time that I put that through, it didn't seem to have a lot of pressure going through. So I'm going to try that again with a 3rd piece, and that seems to be a lot more pressure. And I do tend to run these back and forth at least twice. Now you'll notice I didn't spray down my cardstock with water before I did this. A lot of times they'll tell you with the 3D embossing folders to spritz your paper with water, and then you'll get a deeper impression. But I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to have to wait before I could ink blend on top of this. So I just did this as dry embossing. So it's taken a little bit longer to figure out what the sandwich needs to be to get a good impression. So really, the best I can tell you, for your machine, you might need to play around with it a little bit like you see me doing here. And eventually I'll get it figured out. And then it should be the same for all of the AlteNew embossing folders. Now, if I were using different embossing folders, I might need to switch out to a different sandwich and a different combination. So let's see. So yeah, so that seems to work. So I believe that was the base plate, the embossing folder, 3 sheets of watercolor paper on top of that, the sheet of Neenah in between the embossing folder, and then the adapter plate, and that seemed to work. So now that I've got that figured out, I'm going to go ahead and do some embossing on the other two, or the other card panels I have with the other two embossing folders. Okay, and then this is the last one, and you'll see that the embossing folder, the image on it is a little bit bigger than the cardstock panel that I'm using. These are a little bit larger than 4¼ by 5½, so that they fit on an A2 size card, and I will be trimming these down. So if you have an embossing folder that's a little bit bigger than what your panel is, then you just have to decide where you want to crop it off at with your panel. And that's the last one. Okay, that's a pretty good impression. All right, now we're going to put the Big Shot away and move on to the next step. So after I get the Big Shot put away, I have to do a reset of my desktop so that we have space to do the ink blending. As I said earlier, I do work in a very small space, and at some point I'll do a video tour of my small space. I essentially have a desktop to work on. That's my actual workspace. So when I'm creating like this, that has multiple steps, I have to clean everything up in order to make a space to work. So you will often see that in my videos where I'll clear everything out and then we'll get started again. To help with keeping my paper in place while I'm doing this technique, I am going to use a silicone mat. This one in particular is the small size from scrapbook.com. I got this as a freebie from them. They do freebies pretty often. If you purchase a certain amount, they have different freebies that you can add to your cart for free, and this was one of those. This was the first silicone mat that I ever tried, and I actually liked it well enough that I picked up the larger size of this one. But for today, we just need this small one. So I just had all three of the embossed panels out there, and I went to decide which one I wanted to use. And so I chose this one with the 3 flowers on it. Now you'll see I turned this over. This is actually the back side. There's an embossed side and a debossed side. This is the debossed side. This is the back. And that's the side that you want to do your ink blending on. The reason for that is because this technique actually requires at the end that you swipe over the entire thing with a darker color. And if you were to do the ink blending on the front side of this panel, which is the raised up side, then that would end up covered with your black ink and you wouldn't see your ink blending. So I decided to try something else here. While I was ink blending this one panel, I wanted to see what would happen if I just put colors onto a flat panel and then later run this through the embossing folder just to see what kind of effect that would have. I figured it would be kind of an abstract look, but I guess we'll see. So my ink blending on that is not perfect. The Catherine Puller inks are a really beautiful ink. The ink does smooth out on them, and it won't be as harsh looking as what it currently looks on that sample up there. So for now, on the panel below with the flowers, I am just lightly applying the ink to them. And I forgot to actually tap off the ink off of my brush on these first two. And they actually turned out pretty beautiful. I was really, really happy with how these turned out. I didn't have a whole lot of ink on them to start out. And then this is kind of where it goes. Well, I get a little bit of the ink off up on that top one there because I wanted that to be a little bit darker. But this is about to go south. So I didn't tap off, and there it is. Big blob of ink on that flower. And I thought for sure that I ruined this panel at that point because the other two were so pretty, and this one now was super dark and there wasn't a whole lot of difference. And I was a little bit disappointed, and I thought, well, maybe I can try to wipe it off. Well, ink blending doesn't work that way. But this is going to be okay. We're going to fix this. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to make the other ones a little bit darker so that one doesn't stand out as badly as it did. So we're just going to continue ink blending. And your ink blending doesn't have to be perfect on this. So if you're new to ink blending, just know it's going to be really hard to mess up this technique. So now I'm looking at this and I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to fix this? Because I thought I really screwed it up with the dark ink that ended up on that third bloom. So I thought, well, I need to make it match a little better, otherwise that one's going to really stand out. So I made the decision to go ahead and make the other ones dark as well. So I'm just going to finish ink blending out the pink and trying to make those blend in a little bit so that that one on the end doesn't stand out so badly. And one thing is you don't have to worry about getting outside of the lines on this, because technically when you swipe that black ink pad over top of this, anything that you got outside of the lines is going to be covered up with the black ink. So you can go off of your image and it's perfectly fine. The other thing I want you to know is whenever I do my technique videos, typically, at least for my early videos, you're going to be seeing the very first time through that I try a technique. I have not practiced this before I did this video. This is my first shot at it. I just think it's a more honest approach to do it this way. I'm sorry for my head getting in the way. But I just thought it was a more honest approach to doing things this way, because I want you to see that these techniques are achievable. It is absolutely possible to do this on your first attempt. You might have some fails, and that's okay. And I certainly have some fails coming up in this video. But overall, I just think it's a lot of fun to show you my first time through with it, and to show you that, you know, it may not be absolutely perfect. It may not look like, you know, all the perfect cards that you're going to see posted on social media. And that's okay. In my book, that is absolutely okay. I don't believe in practicing something a couple of dozen times before I shoot a video for it. I want you to see my first time through with it, to see that, you know what, mistakes can happen and it's going to be okay. So you just continue on and you figure out, you know, if it can be fixed, great. If it can't, it's just paper. It's not a big deal. So now I'm just adding in some green for the leaves, and I was using a smaller AlteNew brush there. And that's why my head got in the way, because I was having trouble seeing. I do stand whenever I create. I'm not actually sitting down. I am standing up, so I'm a little bit further away from my paper than I would be if I were sitting down. But I found if I sit down, I can't do anything straight. I'm just better off standing up. So I decided that the AlteNew brush was just a little bit finicky to use on the small spaces. And because it doesn't matter if you get outside the lines on this, you can go ahead and use that bigger brush. To get in the deeper areas, you know, if you want to get them a little bit darker, sure, go ahead and use the smaller brush. But overall, you could use the big brush on this and that would be just fine. So I'm just going to finish touching this up. A couple more little leaves up there. And as you can see, this definitely looks like a hot mess, doesn't it? And that's okay. That's kind of how it's supposed to look. So if you get this far with it and it's looking like a mess, just keep going. Okay, so now we're going to close up that ink pad. Otherwise, my arm will be in that. It's inevitable. It always happens. And we're going to pull out the black ink. Now for the black ink, on these ones, I used Momento Tuxedo Black. And wait a minute. I'm not going to put the ink on there. I'm going to go ahead and finish this panel up here. Basically, I'm just going to add some green to this and finish this off so that after I do the black part of the other one, I can go ahead and run this through the embossing folder. I think that's the order I did this in. Okay, so I'm just going to let this go, and we're just going to watch as I finish adding some color into this. I'm not sure how this panel is going to turn out. Right now it really looks like a hot mess to me, and I'm just not sure at this point that it's going to have the same effect as the one below it, but I guess we'll see. And for some reason I decided to add purple in here. Probably not the best choice. The purple and the red are kind of icky together, but it's okay. We're gonna go with it. All right, so we're going to finish blending in that purple. Purple over the green was not the best idea because that does kind of make a brown muddy color. But we're finished with this. So we're going to go ahead and close up those ink pads again so we don't get them all over us, because we will. And now we're going to go ahead and take that black Momento ink pad if I can get it open. And we're going to swipe that over top of that panel. I noticed right away that this was the ink pad that needed to be re-inked. And at first I thought maybe I would leave it this way. It kind of had a wood grain effect to it as I was sliding this down. And I was debating. But then I decided, maybe if I drug it around in circles, that would help. And ultimately I ended up getting another ink pad. Because this one was just a little bit of a struggle to get the color on there. So, time to grab the other one. This one I had just re-inked it, so it worked a little bit better. Now you have to be kind of careful whenever you're swiping the ink over it because it's really easy to just make the entire thing black if you press too hard. So you don't want to press very hard, but you do want to go over it enough that your background ends up, and I just got black ink on that top panel. So you want to go over it enough so that your background is a solid black. I was using just the corner of the ink pad on this one to get in between the leaves. There's a lot of small spaces on this one, so maybe not the best idea to use this embossing folder, but we're going to make it work. So as you can see, I'm getting black ink on the petals, and that is going to happen on the parts that are sticking up a little bit, and that's okay. That kind of adds to the effect of this. Okay, so I guess we're done with that one. And now we're going to clean up the desk here so that we can emboss that top panel. So now we're going to come back to this panel where I was just randomly putting the colors. And you'll see I also, for some reason, I decided I needed to go back into this with some more purple. And I think I was just trying to get a little bit more color on here and trying to smooth out the ink blending and try to cover up that black ink mark up there. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up through this part because it's simply just adding more colors to this and just trying to make it look a little bit better, I guess. So we're going to bring in the Big Shot again and do the setup so that we can run that colorful panel through with the embossing folder. So we're going to put the panel inside of that embossing folder, and it's going to go pretty much in the same order, where we'll have the base plate, the embossing folder with the panel in it, and the tricky part of this was figuring out whether I needed to have the color portions up or the color portions down. And I believe that I did not do this correctly. So this is me messing with it, trying to figure out which way it was supposed to go in there. And I should have held this over there so that you could see it on camera as I was trying to figure this out. So I opted to do this with the color panel facing upwards, and I believe it should have been facing downwards, but we're going to make it work. So the first plate, the first base, the embossing folder with the paper in it, 3 sheets of watercolor paper, and then the gray adapter plate. And let's see what we got. And that's where I realized that I didn't have the paper in properly because I wanted it to be the debossed side, not the embossed side. So the part that was raised up should have been white, whereas the color portion, the color part of the panel should have been the part that was indented or debossed. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of this video, that whenever I do technique videos, at least for my early videos, it will be my first time through on these techniques. As I said earlier, I have not practiced this. I've not done anything to try this. I am simply winging my way through this the best I can. And sometimes you're going to end up with mistakes, just like I did today. But it's okay, because see that backside there? We can still do the technique on that backside. So the piece of paper is not wasted. And even if it was, it wouldn't be a big deal. It's just a piece of paper. So we're just going to forget that that other side even happened. And we're going to do the technique again on the flip side of that. And you know what? Once you glue this down onto a card panel, nobody's ever going to know that there was something on the other side of it. That's the beauty of paper having two sides. So as we did before, we're just going to lightly ink blend over these flowers. And I am remembering this time that I need to tap off some of the ink so that I don't end up with such dark colors on them. The dark colors are fine. I mean, I think that first panel looks absolutely beautiful. So we're going to make it a little bit lighter this time and try things a little bit differently. For this one, I thought I would try something different other than the black ink that I see everybody using. I thought I would try some blue. So this is a blue pigment ink by Catherine Poehler. And these ink pads are more spongy than what the Momento ink is. And these ones are a lot more juicy as well. And I quickly found out that the sponge pad makes it a lot harder to do this because the sponge is more likely to go down into the indented areas. So my flowers went from being a pretty pink to a lovely little blue color. And I actually kind of like the way that this was turning out. It was different. I definitely like the first panel better, but I thought this was pretty unique. And I might try this with some other ones with the spongy pads, just to get the different color flowers with the highlight being the color that I ink blended. Something else that I'm realizing as I'm using this ink pad is that because it is so much more juicy than the Momento pad, the panel is getting a lot more saturated, and I'm definitely going to have to let this one sit to dry a little bit before I can make it into a card. Otherwise, I'll just end up with blue fingers. So there's the two panels, and overall, I do like both of them. I'm a little partial to the pink one, although the blue one is definitely growing on me, and I know I'm going to make both of these into cards. So which one is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. I had so much fun playing with this technique, and I actually made a few more panels. So I decided that the next video that I'll post will be those additional panels, and then the video after that will be the conclusion to this technique, where I'll show you actually making these panels that I did into cards. So I hope you'll come back and join me for those, and I hope that you enjoyed this video today. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.